finished the book of Romans. Now we're in the book of Corinthians. It's a very interesting book. Okay? And I choose one chapter out of 7 that we have to read this week. I choose the last one. And we'll talk about that because there is one passage that I want to concentrate on. But I think that we need an introduction. Okay. So now I would ask Barbara to help us to read Book of Acts, chapter 18. This is the beginning of the church in Corinth, right? The Messianic congregation there. So we need to know a history before we will talk about the church, right?
After these things, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he found a Jewish man named Aquila, a native of Pontus, having recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all Jewish people to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and began working, for by trade they were tent makers. And he was debating every Shabbat in the synagogue, trying to persuade both Jewish and Greek people. Now when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul became occupied with the message, urgently testifying to the Jewish people that Yeshua is the Messiah. But when they resisted and reviled him, he shook out his garments and said, "Your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." After leaving there, Paul went into the house of a man named Titus Justus, a God-fearer, whose house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the synagogue leader, put his faith in the Lord, along with his whole household. And many of the Corinthians, upon hearing, were believing and being immersed. Now the Lord said to Paul through a vision in the night, "Do not be afraid, but speak and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one shall attack you to harm you. Many people in this city are for me." So he stayed 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. But while Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jewish leaders made a united attack against Paul and brought him before the judgment seat, saying, "This man persuades men to worship God contrary to the Torah." But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jewish people, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or a vicious crime, there would be a reason to put up with you, O Jews. But since it is issues about words, names, and your own law, see to it yourselves. I do not wish to be a judge of these." And he drove them from the judgment seat. Then they all grabbed Sosthenes, the synagogue leader, and began beating him in front of the judgment seat. But Gallio paid no attention to these things. Paul, having stayed many more days, said farewell to the brothers and set sail to Syria, and with him were Priscilla and Aquila. At Cenchrea, Paul had his hair cut off, for he was keeping a vow.
Amen. Okay, so this is the beginning of that church in Corinth. All right, I have several questions to that chapter. First one, what was the response to the gospel in the synagogue in Corinth? Well, the leader accepted. The leader of the synagogue, Crisp, right? He believed, but the rest of the guys in the synagogue was not happy, and they were arguing, and they were trying to, kind of assault Paul, and that's why he left, right? If we'll think about the number of the Jews and Gentiles in this congregation in Corinth, how in percentage, how would it be? What do you think? Mostly Gentiles. That's exactly what we see from the historical background. So what was the significance of Paul's action when he shook out his clothes before the Jews, or the dust from his clothes?
This is a symbolic act of the curse be upon you that you brought upon yourself. You have rejected, so this is your bed, lie in it. I'm going to continue the call that God has given me as a active Pharisee. He knew his first call was to the Jewish people, but God had already told him he would be an apostle to the Gentiles as well. So this is where he says, okay, I have done all that I can do. Now it's time for me to take up my next.
Exactly, yes. In the book of Tosefta, there is a chapter called Achalot, literally means tents. They're discussing about the land of Israel and the land of the Gentiles. And if you see that in this quote from this chapter, it says, Yehuda the baker testified about the northeast, that is the considering pure. And the reminding of all of it is impure on account of being part of the land of the nations. So the land of the nations also considering is not pure, okay? So that's why they have this tradition when the Jews went to the Gentiles' territories. When they are going back home, they have to shake the dust from their feet. They not bring this unclean ground to the land of Israel. Okay, and Paul demonstrated this rejection because Jews was rejecting him, and so he says like, well, you're same unclean as the Gentiles. Now I go to the Gentile territory, and all the Gentiles. And Yeshua actually himself giving these instructions to disciples in Mark 6:11.
And whoever will not receive you nor hear you, when you depart from there, shake off the dust under your feet as a testimony against them. Assuredly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I put New King James Version because in the Tree of Life, the last part of the text is missing. So, but it's very significant for me. I think that is very important to hear that. Yeah, so that's Yeshua's instructions, right? So that's interesting. So, okay, let's conclude about the history. You probably see in the book of Acts in chapter 18 the things that we already discussed. First of all, the friends of Paul, Aquila and Priscilla, he met them in Corinth, and they were out of Rome, you know, and we talk about that when we studied the book of Romans, that they were kicked out of the Rome by the ruler there, and now they are scattering, and Paul met them in Corinth. Okay, so in Corinth there is a synagogue, but the Jews rejecting preaching of the Messiah, about Messiah, and also although the synagogue leader believed, another one who became a leader, that he tried to sue Paul, right? He brought him to the court, and that probably the first case of the anti-Semitic, actions in front of the court. Like all the Gentiles from Corinth, they just beating up the leader of the synagogue in front of the court, and no one cares, you know. So that was maybe first documented act of anti-Semitism in Corinth. So, but anyway, so the congregations of believers in Yeshua in Corinth consisted primarily, yes, that's true, yes. The primary Gentiles of converters. In Russia, we have the tradition if someone sneezes when you talk, it means like he approved it. So that's true. That's true. Yeah, so Barbara is approving my teaching. Thank you. So the purpose of the Paul of epistles into such communities were less Jew and predominantly was the Gentiles. So he tried to help them to behave or conduct the service more or less in the way that will be acceptable for the Jewish community around them. Okay, so that is not like in the book of Romans. In the book of Romans, there was the big portion of Jews and big portion of Gentiles. They started by the Jews. They already set up everything, like especially in area of traditions. But then the believers from the Jews, the Jewish believers was kicked out of the Rome. After a few years they come back. That's create a problem for leadership, not for the traditions and for everything else. This congregation is like our We have a couple Jews and the rest of us are Gentiles. That is, the congregation needed to be taught a lot about, specifically about the traditions, right? So, they need to learn a lot about the Jewish tradition, the book of Corinth, the church in Corinth. The purpose of Paul's epistle to Corinth to help the Gentiles congregation serve as the good witness both to unbelieving Gentiles and also unbelieving Jews, right? So, and because this community was predominantly pagan or Gentiles, many questions arose about their appearance, especially like head covering, the circumcision, the proper of observing of the Lord's Supper, or like I would say the Passover time, or for idol sacrifices like any other Gentiles in that time. So manifestation of the spiritual gifts, the order, and so on and so on. So many questions there. So we're gonna do the marathon, quick run through the chapters and see what the problem was in each chapter. Okay, chapter number 1, verses 1 to 3.
Paul, called as an emissary of Messiah Yeshua by the will of God, and Sosthenes, our brother, to God's community in Corinth, having been made holy in Messiah Yeshua, called as Kedoshim, with all who everywhere call on the name of the Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, both theirs and ours. Grace to you and shalom from the God of our Father and the Lord Yeshua, the Messiah.
So you see that Paul called this community holy. What does it mean? What? Set apart. Does it mean unblameless, unsinful? No. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, holy means separated, like the Levites were separated for the ministry, right? But they were not holy. Yes, they did not sin with the golden calf, but they were not themselves were holy. Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. Anyone can help with that?
When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come with excellence of speech or wisdom, proclaiming to you the mystery of God. I decided not to know about anything among you except Yeshua the Messiah and Him crucified.
What he was preaching when he came to Corinth, what he was main predominantly topic of his sermon.
Jesus was the Messiah.
Jesus is the Messiah and he's crucified. What it tells us about that? You know that there is two messiahs in Jewish tradition. Mashiach ben David, the powerful one, the king who will come, destroy everyone, and establish the kingdom, and Mashiach ben Yosef, who will suffer and die and bring different things to Israel. So, and when he comes, he was preaching about the Messiah, but the one who is suffering, Messiah. Corinthians chapter 3, what do we know about this chapter? Let's read that, 1 to 4.
And I, brothers and sisters, could not speak to you as spirit-filled, but as worldly, as infants in Messiah. I gave you milk, not solid food. You were not ready yet. Indeed, even now you are not yet ready. You are still worldly. For since there is jealousy and strife among you, are you worldly and walking in a human way? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not mere humans?
Yes, thank you. So we know that chapter 3 is a division chapter. They talk about, I belong to that rabbi. I follow this rabbi. I follow. Someone was so spiritual says, I follow Yeshua. Okay, whatever you follow, I follow Yeshua. Okay, so and he was talking about that you are still like children. You know, my dad is bigger than yours, and my dad is better. You know, my dad is. You are like a children. You need milk. I mean, like not the solid food. Okay, so that is the holy church of Corinth, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 4. Let's see what do we have here. 1 and 2, just a couple verses. Anyone?
Each one think of us in this way, as Messiah's helpers and stewards of the mysteries of God. In this case, moreover, what is required of stewards is to be found trustworthy.
Yes, so he said that, well, yes, he established the congregation, but then the Apollos came, and then another leaders came, and then, we all work together. We work together as the co-workers. Look at us as the co-workers. We do the same thing. We are in the same boat, but every one of us should work faithfully and trustworthy. That's the reason, what he tried to solve this problem as well. In chapter 5, and
it is actually reported that among you there is sexual immorality, and such immorality as is not even among the pagans, that someone has his father's wife. And you are puffed up. Shouldn't you have mourned instead, so that the one who did this deed might be removed from among you?
This is also one of the problems in that church. If they would be trained in the law, in the book of Leviticus or Exodus, they would know that is no thing. Okay, so this is not the good things to do. So they need to be trained, but because they were more predominantly Gentiles, they were not having that knowledge, and probably this leader of the synagogue couldn't kind of help them to learn that much. But yeah, so they have a big problem there. Okay, in chapter 5. Chapter 6.
Does any one of you, when he has a matter against his neighbor, dare to go to court before the unrighteous and not before the Kedoshim? Don't you know that the Kedoshim will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to judge trivial matters? Don't you know that we will judge angels? How much more the matters of this life?
Yes, you see that? So there is problems in the congregation. They decided to go to court to solve it, to the pagan court, to the Gentiles court, and he says, hey, you're going to judge the whole world. Even the angels. Couldn't you find someone among you to deal with this? Okay, so this is another problem. And now we're jumping into the chapter 7. So this is main chapter. I'm not going to try. I will try to make it short. But you almost all the time you're not allowed me to do so because we have so many comments. This is great. Okay, let's talk about that. The marriage. Paul's advices regarding the marriage. You have 3 places when you can write the advice of Paul. So we will get 3 advices from this chapter from Paul. So and then the application. Okay, we are here in the chapter 7, and I would probably ask Barbara to help us to read the most of the text from chapter 7 because she is reading today. Can you start, please? Yes.
Now concerning the things about which he wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of much immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband fulfill his obligation to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have the rights to her own body, but the husband. Likewise, also the husband does not have the rights to his own body, but the wife. Do not deprive one another, except by mutual consent for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan doesn't tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But this I say as a concession, not as a command. Yet I wish that all men were like me. However, each man has his own gift from God, one in this way and another that. But I say to the unmarried and to widows that it's good for them to remain as I am. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it's better to marry than to burn with desire.
Okay, very good. Let's summarize. What was the first advice? Barbara is she's already brought it down.
If you can't control yourself, just with women, get a wife.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Very good advice. Anyone? Oh, I saw the hands over there as well. Jeannie, there's microphone. The microphone on that. Yeah.
Actually, I think his first piece of advice was to stay single if you can, and not to marry. But
Yeah.
if you cannot live that way, then you are to marry.
Okay, yeah, well, he tried to say that, yeah, it's better to be single, live for yourself, but no, I'm kidding. For God, it's at the end of the chapter. But, well, if you have this, you cannot control your desires, right? So it's better to get married than to be tempted by that, right? To avoid being consumed by sexual desires, get married, right? And for the same reason, do not limit intimacy within the marriage, right? So if you have these desires, and then even in the marriage, you try to avoid a person, and that's not good. And don't do that. That's what Paul says, right? So yeah, and you need to. Well, we keep it as an advice for the married couples. Okay, let's get the next advice.
But to the married I command, not I but the Lord, a wife is not to be separated from her husband. But if she gets separated, let her remain unmarried, or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband is not to divorce his wife.
He said that this is not his advice, right? This is command. Okay, the Lord commanding it. So let's see what Yeshua said that in Matthew 3, 1 to 10.
The Pharisees came up to Yeshua, testing him and saying, "Is it permitted for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all?" "Haven't you read?" he answered. "He who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh.' So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no man separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and put her away?" Yeshua said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. Now I tell you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery." The disciples said to him, "If that's the case for a man and his wife, it's better not to marry."
Okay, so the disciples, they understand that. Say, well, if I should stay with one wife for the whole life and be faithful and take care of her and so on, well, better not to marry. Okay, so why he is saying that if you're divorced and married to another, then you commit adultery? Well, if you, okay, I'll just give you a little hint, tips. If you go back to the book of Corinthians in your Bibles, not in chapter 7, but in chapter 6 and verses 16, okay, it says a very interesting thing that is probably can help us to understand why Jesus is saying that. Okay, verse 16.
Do you not know that a man who joins himself to a prostitute becomes physically one with her? And for the Tanakh it says, the two will become one flesh.
You see that? So every sexual intercourse, you became one flesh with the person. It's like a marriage, right? So if you are divorced from your wife without this sin already committed, without the adultery, so you still technically, and before eyes of God, you're still one flesh with this woman. So if you remarried, then you may commit adultery to your wife, despite of your divorce legal papers, right? Barbara.
Okay, now verse 9. Whoever divorces his wife except for sexual
True.
immorality and marries another commits adultery. So if you were in a marriage where your husband or wife was unfaithful and that's why you divorced, marrying another would not be adultery.
Because he already broke this chain, right?
Right.
Because he committed adultery from you, right, with another. So he became flesh, one flesh with another lady. So, and now you're kind of free, yes. Okay, but that's what we read from a different text in Corinthians and then in Matthew. Let's continue because we didn't finish this part of advice yet in 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
You want?
Yes, please.
But to the rest I say, I, not the Lord, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer, and she agrees to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if any woman has a husband who is not a believer, and he agrees to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy through the wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy through her. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy.
Okay, so you see that? He continued to talk about divorce part, right? He's not covering the adultery. There's no adultery going on. But if you became a Christian in the family, and then your spouse is not a believer, and then you kind of hard to live together, you want to divorce and maybe get a Christian wife or a Christian husband. So then he advises, okay? It says that not the Lord, but his personal advice, stay together, right? And there's a few reasons of that. He said that made holy. Okay, so what does it mean? The unbelieving husband is made holy through the wife, believing wife. An unbelieving wife is made holy through her husband. What does it mean? Clean? Okay. Any other days? Sanctified. So what does it mean? Like, just give me a normal words. How can you explain that? Okay. Set apart, right? It's like became, there's a few jobs, like remote jobs or removed jobs. Like, for example, the guy who is taking care of the. Do you know that there's a light in the ocean? There is a tower with the light. How do you call it? Lighthouse. Okay, so there's some that remote jobs on the islands. One person is living there and taking care of the lighthouse. So when the whole family moved there, like a husband and wife and the children, so they kind of separated for that job, even if the wife is not really working there, right? So same here. If one is the believer, he kind of separates himself for God, right? And his family is technically, or kind of, became that separation because that is the one unit. This is one body, husband and wife, right? And the children are also separated. And they're not becoming, well, it says clean, they became clean, children became clean, in the comparison of unclean, unsaved areas or children's or families around. Yes.
Somewhere back in the Old Testament, it said something about if you touched like the altar or something, that person became holy.
Yes. It's yes, exactly. It's like, yeah, it's a good example. Thank you. Like, for example, you bring something to the altar, right? Like, let's say you bring a couple lambs together, but you don't want to sacrifice one, right? But you bring another one to the altar, but accidentally the second one has touched the altar. And God said, oh, hold on, that became mine too. It became separated for me as well, right? So, and the same way it says like when you decide which of your shapes became for the sacrifice or 10%, usually they do this, they kind of get the narrow gate and they walk through and they mark every tenth and then give it to the temple, and sometimes they find out the one that they marked is not perfect, is crumbled or something. They want to exchange it to the good one, right? So, and the Lord says no, because you already marked it, it's mine. And then you bring another one, you think this will be better, now it's mine too. Because you, in your heart, you already set him apart for me. So you cannot exchange that. Whatever you already think about is me, it's mine. Okay, so the same way, like a family, we can think about this. If I'm worshiping God, if I'm serving Him, the one who is with me is kind of separated as well, right? So, and that's how they say they became holy, means separated, right? Set apart from, to the purpose of serving, and the children also in that family. So, but basically, now they are holy, it says, for the children. I think that they have these blessings from the beginning, right? If you grew up in a Christian family, in really a Christian family, they worshiping God, you have so much love and care and blessings and Word of God in your life that can bless completely or change your life. But does it mean that the children of that family automatically became saved? No, because they are sinners as well. They need to have their own repentance. They need to have their own way to reconnect to God, even though they have everything from the beginning. Yes.
God has no grandchildren.
Yes, God has no grandchildren. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I was thinking about the blessings, and this text come to my mind in Genesis 39, where it talks about Joseph. He was in Egypt, yes, and he was in house of Potiphar, and he was working, and it says in verse 5, you see, the Adonai blessed the Egyptian's house because of Joseph. Why wouldn't he just bless Joseph? I mean, like, and then the Potiphar would see, hey, Joseph driving such a nice car today. Joseph has such a nice shoes and clothes, why not me? No, the whole house was blessed, right? So because of Joseph being there, so the family of one Christian there, or one believer, one true worshiper is blessed by God, and including children, including family members. That is the probably one of the examples. But let's finish with this part of 1 Corinthians.
But if the unbeliever separates, let him be separated. The brother or the sister is not bound in such cases, but God has called you to shalom. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife?
Okay, yes, and after this big talk, what would be a summary for Paul's advice in this case?
If you can make your marriage work, whether one of you is saved or not, make it work. Don't just automatically separate it.
Exactly. Okay, very good. Okay, let's see. If the one spouse, that's how I put that. If one spouse in your marriage is not a believer, it's better not to divorce. In this way, you may lead them to salvation. Right? You can work it hard, and maybe they will see you're changing in your life, changing in your behaviors, and changing in your attitudes, and they might become a Christian as well. However, if non-believer wishes to divorce, so what? Yeah, we should not stand on their way. Just let them do it. Right? Do not force them to, because we call to peace. That's what Paul says. Okay. Remember, that's Paul's advice. It's not the Lord's commandment, but that's what Paul thinks is better. Okay. There's a little side note inside of this, all these advices, but also it will we get advice from that as well. It's from verses 17 to 24, and this is also an interesting part. We can probably spend a few minutes on that.
Only as the Lord has assigned to each one, as God has called each, let him walk in his way. I give this rule in all of Messiah's communities. Was anyone called when he already had been circumcised? Let him not make himself uncircumcised. Has anyone been called while uncircumcised? Let him not allow himself to be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But keeping God's commandments matters.
So you see that? When we are discussing about shall we be circumcised to be part of the Jewish nations, will we want to be true believers in Yeshua, true followers of Yeshua, or not? So it says it means nothing, but the keeping of the commandments is everything, right? So this is what he says here, but we continue on that text until 24.
One remained in the calling in which he was called. Were you called as a slave? Don't let that bother you. But if indeed you can become free, make the most of the opportunity. For the one who was called in the Lord as a slave is the Lord's freed man. Likewise, the one who was called while free is Messiah's slave. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brothers and sisters, let each one, in whatever way he was called, remain that way with God.
That is his conclusion out of the society, right? The main idea behind the Paul talking here is that just remain as you are. You know, if you are circumcised, don't hide. If you are not circumcised, don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed of that. If you are a slave, it doesn't matter to the congregation or to the Lord, you know, what kind of position in society you are, right? But if you can be free, that would be better, you know, just go free yourself. Yeah, but if you are free, you know, remember that you are also served to someone through the Lord. You are the server of the Lord, okay? So, why he wants us to remain as we are? Yeah, we don't read that yet. Further on, Paul will state that the time is short. That's the main topic, you know, main basis for his understanding, right? Like many believers of that time, he anticipated the imminent return of the Messiah, right? Because for them, it was in their life. Like Yeshua says, "I'll be back," and then, okay, we'll wait for you. They didn't know that he will not come until 2,000 years later. So they were expecting him just be right away. So and then he says, "Well, okay, don't change everything. What the purpose? I mean, like the time is short. Everything will be at the ending. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a slave or free, if you're circumcised or not circumcised, married, not married. You know, just relax, wait for the Lord to come. You know, it will come soon." When some of the churches went too far on that, and they not working, they sell everything, and they just sitting and expecting for Yeshua to come, then Paul was dealing with that problem next time. But yeah, so let's get a little bit of the next portion of the chapter 7. We'll not go to the end, but just to see his basic 4 days advices. Yes.
Now concerning virgins, I have no command from the Lord, but I give an opinion as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think then, because of this present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Don't seek a divorce. Are you free from a wife? Don't seek a wife. But if you marry, you have not sinned, and if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Yet such people will have trouble in this fleshly life, and I am trying to spare you. But this I say, brothers and sisters, the time is short. From now on, those who have wives should be as though they have none, and those who weep as though not weeping, and those who rejoice as though not rejoicing, and those who buy as though not possessing, and those who use the world as though not using it to the fullest. For the present form of this world is passing away.
You see his idea? You know, his time is very short. Why wouldn't you change? I mean, like, keep it like in this way. You know, married, great. Not married, better. I don't know. If you just, you know, the Lord will come very soon. Okay, so that was his advices on that in that chapter. Not the Lord's commandments, though. Okay, let's summarize. So Paul reminds us, be as you are called, because time is short. We're not going to go to the end of the chapter, because that's the main. Well, I think that the rest of it is talking about the virgins to get married. It's the same idea. Let's make an application. How can we apply this topic today to our daily life?
And kind of in that third application of just stop fixating on what could be and live life that what you are doing in the fullness way you can live it to God.
It's a very good application. Thank you, Wes. Anyone else?
I always come back to one of my favorite verses, Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And it goes on from there, but that's the main point.
So he said in this chapter that I wish you to be like me. So, and there's lots of scholars who is arguing about that. Was he married and widowed, or he was never married? Okay, so yeah, but by that time of writing, he probably was a single. So, and he served the Lord to the Lord, and he will do that at the end of the chapter. He will deal with that as an argument. Like if you are married, you want to please your husband, right? If you are not married, you can work for the Lord. I mean, like all the time, the whole time. So that's the benefit of it. So he kind of talking about that at the end of this chapter. Yes, but as I said, lots of the writings of Paul or the New Testament writings became very practicable to us when we are staying on this way of the understanding of the Bible from the Jewish roots and understand the background of it. And here is, of course, universal when we talk about family. It doesn't matter if you're Gentiles or Jews, it's the same. But like in the book of Romans, or even here in Corinthians later on, we will see that the Jewish background just helps us to understand it better. I think that every part of this chapter was to be a huge sermon, one discussion, and I just want us to get through this chapter to see how Paul was thinking and what was the reason for him to give these advices, because he thought that it's the end of the time, a very short time, and that was his reasoning for all these advices. Hopefully this chapter today gives some support or ideas or something for us to be better in our marriages.